I'm Steve Northcutt, welcome back to the channel. We're going to go do a walkthrough on this house. I'm not an inspector, I'm a framing contractor and I'm just checking the jobs after my guys get done framing it. I run multiple crews, and so what I do is go through the house whenever they're done and just check everything to make sure that it's right, because we have to make sure that the quality stays where it should be to make sure everything's on point. So we're going to do another walkthrough and kind of let y'all see what we're looking for. So I'm going to go around and check all the doors. We had a lot of comments about the last videos about the doors. I was putting a lot of time into the doors. I've had a lot of issues with doors in the past where the door wasn't set properly and maybe they've already foamed around it. Maybe the drywall's already on, and it's a real pain to go back and fix it later. So I like to make sure that these doors are set properly to begin with, because it's a whole lot easier to fix it now than later. So we make sure that we got the proper reveal all the way around. Got 6 shims, 6 screws, and I make sure that the door, that the reveal is the same looking at it from the side. So we're wanting to make sure that reveal is the same. So that one's actually off a little bit, so that one needs to be adjusted a little bit. It's just stuff like that that the homeowners and the builders, they appreciate that if you take the time to make sure that stuff is right. Because you won't even notice that until the house is finished, and then they go to shut the door, and then they see a little bit of daylight up here at the top because it's not getting tight up against that weather strip. So if you don't pay attention to that stuff now, then you're gonna have problems down the road. And so it's a whole lot easier to fix it now than later. Same on the windows. We're gonna check the windows, make sure that they operate properly, because you don't wanna have that already bricked and then you can't get to the window to adjust it a little bit if need be. Especially these casement windows, they're really hard to adjust sometimes. And we just install them, so I'm not a window expert, but we just make sure that they'll open and shut properly. Sometimes if the window is not quite the way it should be square, and then that top sash will it'll stick. And especially if it's on a 2-story up in the air, you can't just go out there, and it's really hard to make it right. So we just want to check all the windows and doors, make sure everything is good. Like these right here, they got these brackets. These are supposed to be anchored to the seal to keep that middle from going in and out. And it actually wasn't done, so we'll have to do that. They got this flashing that goes on the head of the window that needs to be put on there. Just stuff like that. It gets overlooked, so we're just here to make sure all that gets done properly. Everything looks really good on this one. They got all their joist hangers on. They got their bearing points good. They got an LVL going across here. The pocket door frames, we got to make sure those guys are good and level. I'm sorry, plumb. Make sure the top is level. This side's plumb. If you don't get that good, then when the trim guy puts the door in, if this track is level here and this is not plumb, then that door is going to hang weird, and when it shuts up in that, or it's opened up into that pocket, it might be sticking out 1/2 inch here and it may be flush down at the bottom. So you got to make sure these guys are level, plumb, which if it's level and plumb, it'll be square. So that's one thing that we're going to be checking to make sure that that's right as well. So we're going to go around and make sure that these guys are all plumb. This door hasn't come in yet. We'll have to come back later and set it at some point. One thing you got to look out for when you got a big opening like this, you got all this weight transferring down right here. You got to make sure that there's bearing. See, there's a joist here and there's a joist here. So we got to make sure there's something underneath that point right there to make sure that doesn't push down into the floor. And so he's either got it, there's a beam that goes across the crawl space right here. So we got to make sure we get a blocking on top of that beam up underneath that to make sure that doesn't come down over time. You may not notice it now they've got the roof on it now, which is getting some weight on it, but you may not notice it until later when they start laying the flooring, and then you start seeing it going down a little bit. This one's sitting right on the joist, but that one I just need to double check and make sure that there's bearing underneath there. Luis is really good about checking all that stuff, but another set of eyes is always good. We don't want to miss anything. Looks like he got his Raptors braced pretty good. He got his collar ties on every 4 feet. His ridge braces are in. He did really good here. He had a valley coming in, and so he blocked that out, put hangers on it like he was supposed to. Looks really good. This stud here's got a pretty good little bow in it, so that needs to be straightened. Making sure we got sheetrock nailers everywhere. We're making sure the plumber didn't cut something out and then leave it. So they got a stud. We always put a stud at this one just got a corner, but here we always put a stud where they can screw the flange of their tub to it. So it's usually, most of the time, it's 34 inches to the outside of the flange, and that gives them something to nail to. And then we always try to make sure that plumber actually had to knock that one over a little bit because they had it in the way. So it's good to find the center of that where their drain's going to be, or their valve, and put 2 studs splitting the center. and that way they got room for their, so he'll put a block across there, and he should put a block across there and secure that so it doesn't move. And then also you got to make sure that you don't have a floor joist in the way of their drain. That's one thing that we tend to overlook a lot. We do pretty good at hitting the toilets, but there's a lot of times we miss the drain of the tub. That kind of looks a little, that might be a little tight right there. Well, you should have, minimum is supposed to be like 30 inches. That's gonna be a little tight from here to here, like, cause look at that corner right there. I need to measure that and see. It could be a little tight. See right here, they took these studs out and didn't put them back so they get their tub in. One thing I always check is to make sure that the bottom of the doors got nailed good, especially if it's a shorter. You know, sometimes they leave the plates when they're framing the walls, and they come back later, and we plumb these up and we cut them out. And so sometimes these are loose because they didn't get nailed good, and so sometimes you have to go back and nail them. They actually did nail. You can see where they nailed this guy after the fact. They actually did nail these. That's good. You just got to make sure that they're still on the line and make sure that they're secured really good, because you don't want those things moving around. You get the trim guys calling you, complaining. So like these little plates here, see he actually put some more nails in there and there. So that's good. Sometimes the guys will cut them and they won't pay attention, and that plate will just be kind of loose because we box frame, so we nail that plate to the bottom of the stud first, and then we stand the wall, and then you cut the plate out. And if you don't go back and nail it, then that's just kind of, you're just relying on the T to keep that door jamb from moving. And you're gonna have a door swinging on this, so you don't want to be moving around. So the reason I'm doing these walkthroughs is to make sure that the guys are doing everything correctly. My guys will be watching these videos, so I want them to see what I'm looking for, just so that they're not overlooking something. Because sometimes we get in a habit, and we may go a couple years and not have any issues with certain things, but then I maybe get relaxed on inspecting certain things, and then we start having issues again. So it's kind of like a cycle. So I gotta stay on top of the checklist to make sure everything gets done properly, make sure all the bearing points are done, make sure the roof bracing is correct, make sure we got our collar ties in, make sure we got our joist hangers, make sure all the holes in the joist hangers are filled, make sure all the studs are nailed at the bottom, make sure there's nothing loose. Make sure that the guys when they're nailing the studs, they gotta spread the nails out a little bit so that the stud doesn't twist real easy. Gotta make sure that the T's get nailed really good. You don't want leads and corners being loose. We're gonna be making sure that at the top of where the header sits on here, that it's tight. We don't want a gap right here, because if there's a gap over time, it'll settle, and then you'll get a crack. You'll get a crack in your drywall right there. So we're trying to make sure all that stuff is. So we went and set trusses on 2 other houses today, and it's at the end of the day, and Connor and I are just walking around this house, just making sure this one's good before they drywall, before they insulate. What you don't want to do is have issues where the builder or the building inspector catches something just because I didn't come back and inspect it, and then they're calling you saying, hey, the insulators are coming in the morning, and it may be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they want you to come over there immediately and get something taken care of so the inspector can come back and check it out. And so we try to make sure all this stuff is done beforehand, so we're not messing our own schedule up because we got to pull somebody off to go back to a job just because somebody missed something simple Connor or myself could have caught just by doing a simple walkthrough. That's what we're doing. We're just checking stuff out. I'm not here to criticize my guys. I'm just here to make sure everything gets done correctly and to save them time down the road. Okay, something that we do up here that's different is our brick pocket. We actually put a 1x4 on the wall, and then a 2x4 block, and then another 1x outside of that. And that gives them a 4 1/4 inch brick pocket, and then they'll wrap that with aluminum whenever they do their soffits and stuff. That's a lot different than a lot of people are probably used to seeing. Sometimes they'll put blocks and put a 2x4 flat and then put a 1x4 on that. This seems to be a pretty good way of doing it, as long as your walls are straight. If your walls aren't straight, then, well, you got more problems than just the brick pocket, but it does make it more challenging if your wall's not straight, because that 1x4 is following that wall. Looks like Luis did a really good job on this one. So I'm also checking to make sure that the gutter boards are all straight. Of course, the roof's already on it, so it's a little late now. You don't want to have that thing not straight. You want to make sure all the gutter boards, band boards, whatever you want to call them, fly rafters, make sure they're all straight. We got really good guys. They make sure stuff's on point most of the time. But we're all human, so I'm just wanting to make sure everything's good. I want to catch it before the builder catches it or the homeowner catches it, because it just makes everybody look more professional if everything is on point. You don't want to have something that's off and then the homeowner sees it. Makes the builder look bad, makes us look bad. So we always want to catch stuff before it gets too far down the road. So we are representing the builder when we're on site, and so it's a bad reflection on him if we're not making sure our stuff is on point. And so the more eyes it's on it, the better off it is.